And it has been preached a number of times, the story of Ruth. And mainly when people talk about Ruth or the story, they focus on Ruth. But today I'm not going to focus on Ruth. Today I'm going to focus on two people. There are actually 6 players in this story. We've got the men, but it's Mother's Day, so I'm not going to focus on the men. We've got Elimelech, we've got Chilion or Chilion, however you want to say his name, and we've got Mahlon, the men. I'm not going to focus on them. And we have the women. We've got Naomi, the mother, the matriarch, and we've got the 2 daughter-in-laws, Ruth and Orpah. But I'm not going to focus on Ruth. I'm going to focus on Naomi, and I'm going to focus on Orpah today. Okay? But I'm going to set the scene for you first of all. So, as you know, there was a famine. There was a famine in Bethlehem, Judah. Okay? And normally what happens in a famine, people are struggling to eat. They're struggling for food. They can't feed themselves. And if you can imagine, if you're a family, if you're a parent with children, you're not just worrying about yourself. You're worrying about the ones that you've got in your care. You're worrying about how you're going to manage, how you're going to feed them, what are you going to do, right? But the one thing that needs to be understood here is that the famine was God's judgment on the people. It was his judgment on the people, okay? Now, if we go back all the way to Deuteronomy chapter 28 and Leviticus 26, it tells us here about the reign of judges. It tells us of how the Israelites were in a cycle. They would faithfully serve God, then they would sin, fall into idolatry, and then they'd become subject to God's judgment. Suddenly, it was no longer peaceful in the land. Suddenly, there were wars. Rumors of wars. They would lose. Their men would get killed. The young sons would get killed. They would get captured into slavery. They would be in trouble, and then there would be famine. And it wasn't until they really felt the pain of that, then they would come back to the Lord. So it was a cycle, yeah, a cycle of idolatry, sinning, captured, slavery, and then redemption. It was a cycle. It was God's judgment. So instead of Elimelech, I might be pronouncing it wrong, but I'm going to call him Elimelech. Instead of Elimelech sitting under that judgment, because it was God's judgment, he chose to pick up himself and pick up his family and travel out from amongst his people to a foreign land. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about the land of Moab, right? Moab were a godless people. The Moabites were people that served idols. And it wasn't just any old idol. They would sacrifice their children. Their children would be born like the firstborn, and they would mark their wrists with a red dye. And it may not be today, it might not be tomorrow. But can you imagine being a mother knowing that at some time in your child's life, maybe their 5th birthday, they're going to be called upon to be sacrificed to the gods of Moab? Can you imagine knowing that that firstborn you can't even properly give your all to because you don't know how long you're going to have them for? That's what they did. And then the young girls, when they were 13 or of fanciful age, they were taken into the temples and so on, and all manner of despicable things were done to them. Imagine, you might think, oh, it's okay, I've got girls. No, doesn't matter what you had. Your children were not safe. You knew that one day you will be called upon to give up your child. That's the Moab. And that's the place where Elimelech took his family to go reside. Ran away from God, from the judgment of God, and took his family. Ran away from the covering of his people into a strange land. Well, you can guess what happened. Elimelech didn't make it. Elimelech left, he died. He might not have intended to have stayed in Moab for as long as he did. Maybe he just got comfortable there. I don't know. But instead of keeping within the safety of God's walls, he left. It didn't work out well for him. What do we do, though, when we find ourselves in that spiritual famine, in that place where maybe you didn't listen to God, or maybe something went wrong. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe you did something. Maybe you didn't do something. Maybe you listened to somebody you shouldn't listen to. Maybe you trusted someone you shouldn't trust. But for whatever reason, you found yourself in a place of famine. What do you do? Do you stay where you are and work it through with your people, with people surrounded who love and care about you? Or do you run? It's within our nature, it's natural for us to run, to want to run, rather than to stay where we are. But there is something about staying where you are to learn the lesson that the Lord wants to teach you. Now, I am feeling right now, the season we're in right now, I'm feeling the after effects of such a lesson. Feeling it right now. And I'm going to focus, just give me one moment to focus on women, because it is Mother's Day, right? The challenges of a mom. When you're a working mom, I've worked more or less all my life, worked through all 4 of my pregnancies till I popped them out. Within a few months, I was back at work again. Sometimes I dragged them with me. Yeah, they worked with me. In the profession I was doing was with kids as well, so it was slightly easier for me to take my kids with me. But the challenges of a working mum, and then for me being a Black working mum in the 80s and 90s, had additional challenge on top. I had to be better than, just to be seen the same as. Better than, okay? I had to give 110% at work. But then I still had to make sure that I was home in time for bath time, for bedtime, for story time, had amazing packed lunches, did the kids' parties, you know, made sure the kids came around on the Saturday for the parties. Don't forget the bouncy castle. Yeah? But then also had to be the great entertainer, Michelin-star cook, you know, get all the grown-ups round once a month for the parties, all of that. And don't forget date night, right? Challenges of a working mum. And I haven't even started with church responsibilities and church activities as well. You can add that on top. So there's lots of challenges, lots of challenges. You can imagine how our poor mums are feeling tired. Yeah? Trouble about being a mum is you have that feeling sometimes of you should be doing more, you know? When you're a working mum and you've got those kids, you think, oh, if I could stay at home, I would, right? I wish I could give them more hugs, more kisses, more of me, listen more, you know? Less cumin. Sorry. For me, it was important that my kids got a good education. Why? Because I knew how tough it was in the world out there. And I knew that if my kids didn't focus on their books, on their studies, then when they would be less able, in my view, to face the world out there. I wanted them to go out there equipped, because they are already, what's the word? I can't think of the word right now. But you know what? You know when kids go out there and you already feel that they've got things against them, right? So I wanted to make sure my kids would be as equipped as possible to go out into the workforce, so that when they went out there, they can try all they can, and I know that they will do well. Wonderful thing about mummies, that thing about guilt though, it doesn't mean that it's very hard for us to say no. Well, some of us. Yeah? It's hard to say no. Because you have that feeling is, I want to do more. So when your kids ask you for things, you give them. And sometimes there are people that, well, not always me, but there are people that put their kids first before God. I met a lady who, her kids were more important to her than her own husband. And I thought that was quite sad, right? Because God wants to be first in your life. And it's that guilt that holds you, that means that you can't say no. It's hard for us mama bears. It's no wonder we can't afford to be sick. And if you're sick, you're not sick for very long. You can't afford it. You got to get up and go. And you know what was really funny as well? I was thinking about God creating women from man's rib, all right? And I started thinking, Lord, that's unusual. Why did you pick the rib? And then I started looking up, what is the rib? What do the ribs do? You know? And when I started looking up all the technical things about ribs, how the ribs are, they're resilient, they're strong, but yet they look weak, right? I'll tell you why I'm going to read it, because I don't want to miss one thing. They might appear lightweight, but they're highly resilient. They expand. Yeah, they expand in the chest, and they contribute to protecting the heart and the lungs. They support the upper body, and they keep it stable. Man, doesn't that sound like a mama? Doesn't that sound like a woman? Doesn't that sound like a woman? Oh my gosh. What happens when imagine you get sick, you have to bounce back. You have to be resilient. What happens when mommy isn't resilient? Doesn't the whole house seem like it falls down? If mommy's sick, you walk through the door, oh Lord. The house not clean, food not cooked, kids not dressed, kids not ready for school, packed lunch not done. Isn't this our life? So we can't afford to be sick. You got to be there and you got to be ready. Yeah? Just like a woman, she's able to expand. And when I say expand, I'm talking about in her love. Her love is, no matter how she's feeling, this is woman. She's able to expand herself so that her love goes out, covers and comforts. Do you know the amount of times I did not feel up for it when my kids came to me and said, oh, and you're like, what? I've just done 8 hours at work, commuted on the underground, come home tired, I've come home, I've got to cook, I've got to get dinner on the table, and then my kid wants to come to me moaning and crying that this person called them a name or whatever it is that's destroying them at that moment. And it's oh so important to them. And I'm hearing them say, oh, he called me a name. And I just want to say, suck it up. But I can't. Because for that kid, their world is ending. So the capacity to love, to put yourself on the back burner so that you can surround your child, surround your family, and give them what they need in that time, that's woman. That capacity to support her husband, to protect that heart. And when I looked at that, I thought, how can you protect your partner's heart? How do you protect somebody's heart? By giving them the emotional support they need. By being there for them. By validating them. By respecting them. The one thing, when I asked my husband many, many years ago, what's the one thing you want from me? The one thing. For me, I will tell you, just love me. Please, 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 just love me. What's the one thing you want from me? You know what he said? Just respect. Respect. If you respect me, you can do anything. Just respect. Validate me. When you respect and validate your partner, they trust you. When they trust you, they listen to you. Why? Because they know you got their back. They know you're in it together. They know that they're not by themselves. That's woman. You've heard that saying that a face that only a mother could love? How? Because woman, the Bible says that, we see the outward, but God alone can see the heart. That is true. But I'm going to give you a little spin. Woman can't see the heart. No, we can't see what's going on inside of you. But God has given us this innate sensitivity, this ability, and it's a God-given ability because we don't have it ourselves. It's not of me. He gives us that sensitivity where we can tune in to you, to something in you. We can recognize a need. We can see, you'll say to me, I'll say, oh, how are you? And you say, I'm fine. You go smile on the face. And I can tell instantly, you're not fine. That's God. He's given us that ability to be able to tune in to people and say that need. And it's up to us as women to listen, depending on the relationship you have with the person, of course. But to say you're fine, okay? Your face don't quite look fine. Now may not be the time to go through it, to talk, but I'm here. If you need me, talk to me. I'm available. That's woman. Let me tell you a fun fact about bruising a rib. Woman, yeah, she sees the potential of what can be, right? So you know that whole thing about walking up the aisle and changing the man? She sees the potential of what can be. It's not that she's seeing the heart, but she's seeing what can be. So if you've got an ugly child, I'd be beautiful, little, beautiful baby. Nicole wasn't a very pretty child. Sorry, Nick. I love you. I love you. I thought she was the most precious little round, chubby, fat thing. She was bright red in the face with this mass of hair, right? And most people looked at her and were like, yeah. I was like, is she gorgeous? And they were like, maybe she will grow prettier, you know? And she hates her baby pictures. I love her baby pictures. We called her Hair Bear. She was so cute, but so not cute. But so cute. A face only a mother could love. Yeah, that's woman. We've got that capacity within us that we can love where others may not love. That's woman. More so than man. That's why I guess the child comes out of the woman. The man has to grow that attachment to that child. But for us, it's innate. It's you've nurtured it, you've carried it, you've felt it moving within you. You've sung to it, you've spoken to it, you've apologized to it. You've done all those things before you've even seen the baby. You've got that connection that I can't even explain. That no matter where you go, you'll hear your child crying for you in a crowd. You know it's your child. Do you know that I've been to fun fairs, wherever, and I've heard my child say, I know it's my child. Sometimes I know it's my child, I say, that's not my child. Yeah, have you done that? You hear your child, you're like, and I'm not picking it down on the floor, crying and kicking up them foot. It's not my picking it out. Oh, sorry, I get fatwa sometimes. Apologies. That thing when, oh yeah, that's it. Fun fact about the ribs. So about the ribs. Did you know that when you break a rib or bruise a rib, there's no such thing as a cast or crutches or staying off it for 6 weeks or not walking? Oh no. When you bruise and break a rib, they say, take painkillers, suck it up, you'll feel better in a few weeks. Yeah? We can't lay in bed as a woman and say, not feeling it, you know, and take time out of our lives. No, we've got to suck it up, take a painkiller if you have to, and get on with it. Crack on. Yeah? So let's go back to Elimelech. I said I'm not going to focus on him much, right? But the man vexed me. Do you want to know why? I'll tell you why he vexed me. Because we are supposed to submit to our husbands. Yeah? The Bible tells us to submit to our husbands. All right? Now, if they were working in proper partnership, Naomi would have had his heart. Right? She would have been supporting him. She would have been there for him. She would have been able to counsel him and talk to him, and he would have been able to listen to her. But he decided to pick up himself, pick up his wife, and pick up his children, and leave the safety of God's people to go to a foreign land. A foreign land that they knew about. For the Israelites, it was known that it was against the law for them to associate with or even marry a Moabite. It was against the law, so they knew it. It was against Jewish law. They knew they shouldn't do that. They know they shouldn't associate with them. But he took himself and his family there anyway. So it's no surprise that he soon died. Because you can't run away from God's judgment. You can't. You think you can, but you can't. Because when I said judgment, or your consequences, you can't run away from your consequences. Because they will find you. They will find you. So many times you see the people who murder or do whatever, right? It may be 20 years, maybe 30 years or whatever, but they find them. And not only do they find them, when they catch them, you know what you often hear? Because I watch Crime Channel a lot. You often hear, for 30 years, I've been running, I've been hiding, I've been ducking from here, ducking to there. Then they can't live a happy, comfortable life. Because you can't live a happy, comfortable life when you are under God's judgment. Do you not see that? You can't. You can't be comfortable. You can't run away. Because he knows where you are, first of all. And you certainly can't run away from yourself. It's with you. So when you've made a mistake, and I'm not saying that because we don't make mistakes, we do, of course we do, we all do. I've made many. But running away from the mistake is not the way. Facing God's judgment is the way. In David's words were, he would rather fall into the hands of God than into the hands of man, because he knows that's where mercy and grace are. Fall into the hands of God. Don't fall into the hands of the Moabites. There's no grace where man is. Man will treat you as they see fit. God will at least have mercy. I'm going to tell you a quick story. We went scuba diving in Cancun a few years back, 10 years ago. And I used to love going scuba diving, absolutely loved it. I used to love snorkeling, scuba diving, going under the water, seeing all the pretty fish, seeing the turtles, all of those creatures, loved it. One day, let me take off, sorry, Tony and I, sorry, it's so hard not to go into patter when the story hits me. Tony and I took up ourselves to go scuba diving. We've done it before, remember? This day, they gave us a speech. Don't touch the coral. Don't touch the turtle. It's all very pretty. Just look. You can take pictures because you can bring those underwater cameras, but don't touch anything. Just look. So we're swimming along. It's wonderful seeing all the fish. They're so pretty, so gorgeous. The turtles are amazing. Suddenly, the ocean that was full of fish was empty. And you're like, how can the ocean be empty? There's fish everywhere. In literally flick of a finger, ocean that was full of fish, empty. Nothing was there. And there was a silence that I cannot tell you. I cannot explain the silence in the ocean. There was silence. And we knew something was wrong. And there was me swimming, and then I see this thing was 5 foot long, and it did this alongside me, and then it turned like this, and it turned its face and looked me directly in my eye, and it was a 5-foot barracuda, and I saw the teeth. And in that one moment, I knew I wasn't at the top of the food chain. In that one moment, I knew I was prey. I knew I was prey. And I'm telling you, there is nothing more chilling when you say to yourself, Lord God, this is a mistake, save me. It was after my ring. Why? 3 weeks ago, a barracuda took somebody's hand off. Why? Because there were unscrupulous fishermen there that were taking people out to get money, and they were feeding the barracudas so people could get wonderful pictures. So the Barracudas, then in their minds, when they see your hand, they're expecting food. So they're literally coming in to grab. It was after my ring. You know what the man said to me? This is our guide. He was indicating for me to take my ring off and drop it in the sea. Do you really think I'm going to take my ring off and drop it in the sea? I wasn't doing that. I wasn't doing that because for me, this is a symbol of my marriage to my husband. I refused. I took my ring off, but I put it in my mouth. And I had to have this guide who was this massive man. I mean, he must have been about half a kilo. I know this guy was huge. He literally carried me. We had to swim a mile back to shore. It was a mile back to shore. That whole time being stalked by a barracuda. I have never been so scared in my whole life. I knew this thing was stalking us all the way back to shore. Following all the way back to shore. The guide was terrified because why was he terrified? Because if I got hurt, he knows that this is going to affect his trade. He was terrified all the way back to shore. In that moment, I knew no one didn't have to tell me. I knew I was not top of the food chain. I knew that I wasn't the most important thing. And I also knew I'm not going scuba diving again. I'm good. Sea is for sharks and land is for me. So I might dabble my toes. I won't even go waist height anymore because I know the sharks can go waist height. But I learned a lesson in that day. I'm telling you, when you learn a lesson, you don't unlearn it, you know. When you learn something for yourself, no one can tell you different. There is something about me telling you that story. You can go repeat that story and tell somebody else, and they might believe you. But it's a story you're telling somebody else about something else, about someone else. There is nothing like learning that story for yourself when it is your story. So, Elimelech dies. Naomi's sons, Kilian and Mahlon, do they go back to Bethlehem? No. They decide to take Moabite wives. The very thing they were forbidden not to do. Maybe Naomi didn't have a say in it. Maybe her kids, boys turned to her and said, Mom, they're so pretty. Maybe they were there eyeing them up for a time. And Mom is so distraught because she just lost her husband, was like, fine, whatever you want to do it. They take the Moabite women, yeah? And the custom in those days was that the daughter-in-law would move in with the mother, with the son's family. So Ruth and Orpah would have moved in with Naomi. And they would have seen how she conducted herself. They would have seen, because even though she's in a strange land, there would still have been the customs that she would have held to from before. Because you might come out from under the grace of God, but oh boy, he's still there, you know. He's still there. There were times in my life, even as a teenager, because I got saved many, many years ago. I was baptized at 15. But I had my period where I went away from God, of course. I had my time when I went off and did my own thing. But believe me, God was forever talking to me. I could hear him speaking. I'd be doing something that I know was wrong. I'd be there boogieing, and I'd be like, I could hear him saying to me, what do you think you're doing? Yeah? Or I'd say something. Cuss. And he'd be saying, yeah. Anyway, yeah, he was forever reminding me, listen, you know who you are, right? You maybe have moved from the place, from the anointing, from the protection, but you know who you are. And just like that murderer on the run, I was never comfortable in that life because that was not my place. That's not where God wanted me to be. He wanted me back in his house with his people under the covering and protection of my family. That's where he wanted me. So Orpah and Ruth would have seen this woman. They would have seen some faithfulness there. They would have seen how she conducted herself. They would have seen the Lord through her eyes. And then the awful thing happened. The thing that you can't imagine happened. Kilian and Mahlon died. And then Naomi's world just fell apart at that point. Her men were gone. Her men were gone. And in Jewish times, maybe now we think, okay, I've lost my husband. I might have to go out to work. I might do this. I might have to do that. Not so in those times. You relied on the men. The men were the ones that went out to work the land and so on. They did that. She lost all of the men. What did it mean now as widows? It means they have to be there begging for handouts, relying on the charity of their family. Ah, but guess what? Where's the family? There's no family. The family was back in Bethlehem, Judah. She's in Moab. She's in a strange land. She's got no family. So then suddenly Naomi comes to her senses, which is, hold on a minute. I heard that my God has been providing for my people back in Bethlehem. What am I doing here? I need to go back. I need to go back. I didn't tell you the title of this message today. It's The Past in Its Place. The past in its place. And the question I want to ask, you don't have to answer me, but the question I want you to ask yourself is it wrong to go back? Is it wrong to go back? You know, a lot of the times people say, keep going forward, keep moving forward, keep moving forward. Can you move forward, though, by going back? I'm going to challenge you that you can. So Naomi's on the road. They're on the road. She's on the road with Ruth, with Orpah. They're on the road back to Judah, back to Bethlehem, Judah. And Naomi looks at her daughters, and maybe she's feeling something. The word isn't telling me this. This is me. I'm thinking if it was me. Maybe she's feeling something. Maybe she's looking at her daughters and she's thinking, oh, I'm going back to my people, right? I'm bringing these two with me. They're going to share in my shame. Naomi probably feels mortified. She's coming back without her husband. She's coming back without her sons. She's coming back to seek the charity of her family. She probably feels shame. She's already said, change my name to Mara, bitter. Because the Lord has dealt harshly with me. She feels awful, right? So maybe in her mother's heart, she's thinking, I have shown all these two women God through my eyes. Look at me now. I want to run off in secret. I want to go run off and hide. I don't want them to witness my downfall. No, please leave me. I'll deal with this on my own. How many times do we do that? How many times do we, instead of relying on each other, we feel shame and we say, you know what? I don't want people to see how far I've fallen. So we run off and hide. Or we might go back to our family, like the prodigal son. Think about the prodigal son, the story there. Yeah? He took his father's inheritance, he asked for it early, went off and spent it, whining, gambling, all the rest of it. Then he had nothing left. And he thought, hold on a minute. Even the pigs in my dad's house eat better than I'm eating right now. I'm going back. I'm going back. But I bet he didn't go back and tell his daddy all the stuff he did. No. He went back. And now did daddy turn to him and say, where are you going? You got everything you needed off. No, he didn't do that. He opened his arms and he welcomed his son home because he said, once he was lost, oh my God, and now he's found. He was dead to me, and now he's alive again. He was forever lost, going to a soul godless eternity. And now he's back within the fold. Redemption has come. What was Naomi's words? So this is her trying to persuade them to go back. She says, no. I'm too old to get married. And even if I did, what use for you to hold on and wait until I have children if I have children? And then you've got to wait for those children to get to a certain age where you can marry them? Nah, please. Go back home to your people. Go find joy and happiness in the arms of another husband. Don't wait for me. Now, Orpah, I told you I'm not really going to speak about Ruth today, but Orpah, first of all, I feel so sorry for Orpah. Do you want to know what her name means? Her name means stiff-necked, yeah? Double-minded, and gazelle, right? That's her name. Her mother and father named her that, just saying, right? Stiff-neck, double-minded, and gazelle, right? Double-minded man is not stable in his ways, right? Stiff-neck. When my parents call you stiff-neck, it means they're telling you to do something, you're like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not going. Stiff-neck. And what about a gazelle? Gazelle is flighty, easily startled. That's Orpah, right? That was Orpah courting. It's like she didn't have a chance. There are so many Orpahs in our lives, right? But Naomi had a choice. Orpah was on the road with her, with Ruth. Naomi could have. Remember I said about a mom? You're able to put aside how you're feeling and what you're going through for the sake of your children, aren't you? Yeah? When your little one comes to you and says, oh, scrape my knee, you don't kick them to the curb and say, my elbow's hurting me, just shut up. You deal with them, you look after them, you help them. Right? Naomi had a choice. She could have been a positive influence on Orpah right there. She knew that this woman, she would have had her in her home for however many years. She knew who she was dealing with. She knew the daughter-in-law she had. She also knew Ruth. She knew the daughter-in-law she had there. Instead of encouraging them both to go, encouraging Orpah to go, she could have said to her, look, and this is where honesty comes in, and I'm not suggesting it's easy, but she could have said to her, look, this is how I feel right now. I feel bitter, call me Mara. I feel that the Lord has dealt harshly with me. I feel that the Lord has turned his back on me. But this is the God I know. I know that whenever my people have gone wrong, have turned their back on him, have sinned, we've fallen on hard times because of what we've done. We've had wars, we've been taken into slavery, but when we turn to him and we cry out to him, our God hears us. That's what she could have said. I'm going to trust in the God that hears me, that hears my cry. And I might not feel amazing now. I may not feel great now. But I'm going back to the one, because there I'm going to find mercy, and there I'm going to find grace, and I'm going to fall into the hands of the Lord. She had the choice, but instead she pushed Orpah away. And now with Orpah, every time I think about Orpah, well, the thinking about Orpah is that she was the faithless one, Ruth was the faithful one, Orpah was the realist, Ruth was the visionary. I call Orpah practical, right? Orpah's there thinking, hold on a minute. So she's probably following them, and then she might be just kind of slowing down a little bit, thinking, hold on a second. I'm about to go on a road to a place with a people that don't like me. With a woman who's really bitter right now. I mean, she was great a couple of years ago, but my gosh, look at her now. I'm going to have to beg for handouts. Remember, these people don't like me. Maybe I should go back to my people. At least they're my people. Remember, she's stiff-necked, she's a gazelle, she's double-minded. She's thinking what she needed in that moment was her mother-in-law to say, come. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but I know who holds tomorrow, that wonderful song, and I know who holds my hand. That's what she needs, because we all have an Orpah in our lives. We do. We have an Orpah, and we can either minister to them, speak words of life into them, or we can help them along the road of instability to where they're going. The sad thing is we don't hear from Orpah again. We don't hear the end of Orpah's story. And for me, that's really sad, because for me, that's a real missed opportunity. So, I know some people here might be thinking, I'm not a mother. What you're saying isn't really relevant to me. It's not important to me. I don't have children, or I have children, but they're long grown. Right? We are our brother's keeper. God's given us gifts as women to nurture, to encourage, to love. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be your child. But tell me, how many times has a word of kindness that you said to somebody lifted their day? Yeah? This happened to me at work once. I was so embarrassed at the end, but I followed what God said and ended up becoming mortified by it. There was this lady, my office every day, buzzing through the door, bright sunshine. She's the one that she'd run into the kitchen, she'd make you cups of tea, busybody, like running around, full of the joys of spring. One day I got into the office early, about 8 o'clock. No, before 8 o'clock. And she was in the kitchen, getting her teas ready. She was crying. And I was like, Diane, are you okay? She nearly fell off her chair when she saw that I was, she was, oh gosh, yes, I'm sorry. And she started buzzing again. I said, no. Something's not fine. What's going on? And I just held her hand. And by the way, I don't like touching. I held her hand, and this woman just broke down. And she told me what was going on in her life. And in that moment, God gave me a word for her, and I gave her that word. From that day, not only did Diane then use me as her personal confidant, but from that day, God did something in that relationship. He did something in that woman. And that was because somebody was able to look and see and say something. I see you. I see you. I could have said, she's not my sister. She's not even saved. You know? I could have walked away. And there are times when it's appropriate to do that. There are times when it's not the right time to say something to somebody. I get it. God leads you to who he wants you to touch and minister to. But who knows what seed was planted in that day? Who knows? Who knows? There's an advert that comes on the TV. It's the Tesco Food Love Stories. It's only 30 seconds long. I'm going to ask Theo if you can put this up and play this for you right now. And just listen to this. Just watch it for me.
Look, I know, I'm sorry, but we're gonna get her down. I just thought you might like this. Oh, that's so nice.
Tesco finest shiitake mushrooms, hand-picked for a rich flavour. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco.
The reason I absolutely love that story. Oh, echo. Is it okay now? Okay. The reason, when I first saw this advert, I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with it. You know why? Because we are so quick to judge. We are so quick to judge when we don't know what's going on in somebody's lives. You know? That thing about not being able to see the inside. But isn't it amazing that poor woman, that poor mum, probably a new mum, yeah? Probably doing all that she can. And this baby won't sleep. She's probably tired. And then someone knocks on the door, and instantly she's thinking, oh no, the neighbours are here to complain. I'm so sorry, I can't get to sleep. But she's handed a gift. Imagine if we can hand a gift to people that are not expecting it. Imagine if we could be a blessing in somebody's life. Imagine if Naomi had given that gift to Orpah. What a difference that might have made. She might still have gone back to her people, I don't know. And you know what? A part of me, because I'm a glass half full person most of the time, a part of me is still thinking, well, maybe she went back to the Moabites, yeah, and she sowed a seed, yeah, she refused to get involved in the idolatry and all that sort of stuff, and she brought Jesus with her. But the reality is probably not what happened. The point of that message there is, don't allow your feelings, your bitterness, your shame, whatever it is you're going through, don't let that get in the way of how God could use you. One thing that we spoke about years ago is I do what I know, yeah? And one of the things I say is, I do what I know, and when I know better, I do better. You can only work with what you know at that time, right? But the hope is, when you know better, you do better. So going back, Naomi went back. She went back to her people, but she went backwards to go forwards. She went back to a place of safety. Yes, she took her bitterness with her, but she went back to a place of safety to prepare herself to be with her people. Imagine, you know, when a soldier is badly injured on the field, right? Badly injured. They take them to the field hospital, and then what do? They send them back home. Why? Why don't they just patch them up in the field hospital and then let them stay there for a certain number of months and put them back on the field again? No. They send them back home because they want them to be surrounded by their people. Because a wounded soldier at home has a far better chance of success of getting back to health than away from home. Because there is nothing like being surrounded by your people when you're wounded. Why? Because when you're wounded, you're at your most vulnerable. So when you're at your most vulnerable, you want to be around people who love you. You want to be around people who have your best interests at heart. You want to be around people who will care for you, who will nurture you, who will maybe even sacrifice their needs for you. That's what you want when you're hurting. That's why when you've made a mistake, when you've done something wrong, when you've been disobedient. Go home. Go home. Because that's where you'll find your redemption. Go home. When you've moved away from God, when something's gone on, yeah? Come back home. There's grace there. There's mercy there. There's redemption there. We will face real troubles. We will face poor decisions. And we do want to run away. I never expected to have to go back into the workforce right now. But I made a decision last year. We made a decision that has seriously affected our family and our finances. We invested in a company that's gone bankrupt, and it's taken everything. And I could have run away in shame, because of course I felt shame. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm business savvy. Yeah? I know all about investments, studied it, worked in it years in the city, right? I know all about that stuff. I saw myself as business savvy. However, trusted in my son. Remember what I said about mom? A mom will say yes to their children. My poor son trusted in his business partner. That was the problem. As I said, we could have run away in shame and said, Lord God, if we had spent a little bit more time listening to you and not trusting that on the promises that we were given, empty promises in the end, then maybe we would be in this position. But I tell you what, I can either live in that shame, right? Live in that despair, or I can turn to God and say, the Lord that has kept us for 50 plus years, right? There were times when we're eating corned beef sandwiches for dinner, right? There were times when we didn't know where our rent was coming from. That was going back 30, 40 years ago, 30 odd years ago, right? We know what God did then, right? So we know what God can do now. Now, the difference is, this is the past in its place. The past me had faith maybe this high, right? And I might think I'm going backwards because I'm going back into the workforce now. But I'm going backwards with the future me, with the me that's here now. I'm not that person then. So if you feel that you ever need to go back to something, you're not going back as the old you. You're going back with who God created you to be now, who you are now, the stronger you, the more resilient you. And let me tell you something, just like the barracuda, you'll never forget the lesson. And you're more unlikely to find yourself in that position again. Because once a lesson is learned, it is learned. Right? I'm going to leave you because time is up. I'm going to leave you with some words of wisdom, not my words. Right? This is somebody called Dale Turner. His words said, the error of the past is wisdom and success of the future. For the past cannot be changed, but the future is yet in your power. And I'm going to end with 2 Corinthians 4, verses 16 to 18. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, I know it doesn't feel light sometimes, but our light affliction, which is but for a moment. And sometimes, oh my gosh, how long were the Jewish people in Egypt? 400 years? God said it's but a moment. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things that are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. We can either focus on the things we see. Each month, I've got to come up with this huge amount of money to pay for this thing. I can focus on that. And I'm not going to pretend to you that I don't focus on that at some points in the month. It does get me, right? Or I can focus on the faith and the divine power of my God to provide into my life. And every single month, God has come through. Every single month, he's come through. God is able to provide. I lean on him and I trust in his power. I will not let my past mistakes and the past me define who the present me is and define who the future me will be, because God knows that. And God holds the future me in his hands too. And if I want the future me to have a share in eternity, I better deal with the present me and trust him. Praise God.